Today's number is 10, as in 10%. That's the real world acceptance rate of AI generated code, once you account for the rewrites that happen in the days and weeks after it's written. Not 80%, not 90%, 10. On the surface, AI coding tools look like magic. Developers accept anywhere between 80 to 90% of what the AI actually suggests. Sounds pretty incredible, right? Well, an analytics firm called Wadev went a little bit deeper for us. They tracked what happens to that code over time across 10,000 engineers and found that when you factor in the code that gets quietly rewritten, reverted, or simply thrown out in the weeks after it's merged, the real survival rate of that code drops somewhere between 10 and 30%. Hang on to those numbers for a moment. We'll get back to them later. Well, it's Monday morning. Happy Monday and welcome to the work week. 3 senior OpenAI executives walked out the door on the same day: the product chief, the head of Sora, and their enterprise CTO. And TechCrunch is calling it an existential crisis for OpenAI. Google, Perplexity, and OpenAI all launched desktop AI apps within the same week. And they're coming for the way you use your computer. And yes, a new term is emerging out of Silicon Valley called tokenmaxxing. And it's exposing a gap between how much companies are spending and how much are actually getting done with AI. And Maine just became the second state to ban AI from providing therapy. The ground is shifting, so let's figure out where it's actually moving here. I'm Dom Michalik, and this is your Morning Intelligence for Monday, April 20th, 2026. Here's what we've got for you today. In the lead story, OpenAI just lost 3 senior executives in a single day. We'll break down who left, why they left, and what it means for the tool 900 million people use every single week, especially with the Musk trial just 7 days away. In the rundown, the desktop AI war is just getting started. 3 companies, 3 new apps, all in 1 week. Then, yes, we'll get into token maxing, the Silicon Valley trend that's making developers look more productive than they maybe actually are. In today's deep cut, Maine just banned AI therapy. Missouri might be up next. If you've ever vented to a chatbot about a bad day or a bad week, well, this story's for you. And we'll close today's episode with the Chinese AI lab that crashed NVIDIA's stock last year. They just took outside money for the very first time. Let's go ahead and get into it. Let's start with the OpenAI story because something happened late last week that I think deserves a little bit more attention than it's getting right now. 3 senior executives left the company on the same day, April 17th. Kevin Weil, Bill Peebles, and Srinivas Narayanan, all on the same day. Kevin Weil was OpenAI's chief product officer, the person who shaped how ChatGPT works and feels as a product. He moved more recently to a lead role on a new initiative called OpenAI for Science, which launched a life sciences model called GPT Rosalind the day before he left. That initiative is now being folded into other research teams. Before OpenAI, Weil was head of product at Instagram and Twitter. Bill Peebles led Sora, OpenAI's AI video generator. Sora was shut down last month. It was reportedly burning around $1 million a day in compute costs alone. OpenAI killed Sora and a $1 billion Disney deal to free up resources for what's next, presumably the model everyone keeps calling Spud, which may ultimately end up being GPT-6. Srinivas Narayanan was a chief technology officer for enterprise applications, the person building on the business side of OpenAI. He said he's leaving to spend more time with the family. Now, these exits come on top of Fiji Simo, who stepped away from her role leading product and business on medical leave earlier this month. So, in the span of a few weeks, OpenAI lost its product chief, its science VP, its enterprise CTO, and its consumer product leader. TechCrunch published an analysis last night, and I think it's the right framing here, calling this not just personal stories for each of these individuals, but an identity crisis for OpenAI as a whole. OpenAI is shedding what TechCrunch is calling side quests here. Your Soras, your science initiatives, all the creative bets to focus everything on enterprise AI and that next frontier model. But in doing all that, it's losing the people who built its consumer identity. And all of this is happening just 7 days before jury selection begins in the Musk versus OpenAI trial in Oakland, a trial where Greg Brockman's diary, again, Brockman is co-founder of OpenAI here, his diary reportedly calls the company a lie. So why does this matter? Well, here's why I think this should matter to you. ChatGPT has roughly 900 million weekly active users. That was confirmed a couple months ago. If you're listening to the show now, there's a good chance you use it at work or maybe even at home. When the people who shaped how the product works all leave in the same month, and the CEO has already stepped away from overseeing safety here, the question isn't necessarily what happened internally at OpenAI. The question is the product that I depend on about to change direction in a very significant way? The bottom line here, the company behind the AI tool most of us use on a daily basis just lost 4 senior leaders in the span of a few weeks. A $134 billion trial starts jury selection in just 7 days. And the next model, the one they freed up all that compute costs for, still hasn't shipped. If you've built on ChatGPT into anything that's rather business critical or critical to your workflows, this is the week to evaluate and to keep an eye on where the company is actually going. All right, let's go ahead and get today's rundown. 2 stories, both of them are about the same thing, the gap between what AI looks like on paper and what it actually looks like on your computer. Let me walk you through what happened last week on the desktop AI front because 3 things landed almost on top of each other. Last Tuesday, Google launched a native Gemini app for Mac. It's free. You hit Option Space and it simply pops up. It can see whatever's on your screen and it can help you with anything, literally. No copy pasting, no switching tabs. It generates images, it generates videos. It's free for basic use, obviously, but with paid tiers going up to $250 a month for the full suite. The next day, on Wednesday, Perplexity launched what they're calling Personal Computer for Mac. And this one is a little bit different from the Gemini app. It's not a search tool per se, it's an always on AI agent that can access things like your iMessage, your mail, your calendar, your local files. It runs 24/7 on your Mac with full access to your applications. Price tag for that one is $200 a month, but it's only for Mac subscribers. On that same day, on that same Wednesday, OpenAI shipped a major update to its Codex desktop app. Codex can now see your screen, click buttons, fill out forms, and work across all your Mac apps while you do something else, using its own cursor in parallel with yours. 90 plus plugins, memory that carries across sessions. 3 million people are already using it starting this week. 3 companies, 3 desktop AI products, all happening last week. Google's pitch is simple. I'm your free search companion. Perplexity's is I'm your AI operating system, and OpenAI's Codex pitch is, well, I'm your AI coworker. So what? If you work on a Mac, your productivity tool just probably arrived 3 times over. And if you don't, well, Windows is up next for those 3. AI really has stopped being more about chat and it's starting to work more and more on your desktops. And obviously, this is something to keep an eye on as we move forward. So, while those 3 companies are racing to put AI on your desktop, there's a growing body of data asking a very pointed question. Is all this AI usage actually making people more productive, or is it just making them look busy? There's a new term for this. It's called tokenmaxxing. And if you don't know what a token is basically a unit of AI models processing. So roughly 3/4 of a word. Every time you use ChatGPT, Claude, Codex, or Cursor, you're consuming tokens essentially. And in Silicon Valley right now, consuming more tokens has become, well, a badge of honor. How much of a badge of honor? Well, Meta built an internal leaderboard called Claudenomics, yes, named after Anthropic's Claude, that ranked all 85,000 employees by individual AI token usage. The top users earn titles like Token Legend and Cash Wizard. In a single 30-day period, Meta employees collectively burned through 60 trillion tokens. The dashboard went viral and Meta shut it down just 2 days later. NVIDIA CEO Jensen Huang said if a $500,000 a year engineer didn't consume at least $250,000 worth of tokens, he'd be, in his words, deeply alarmed. Y Combinator CEO Gary Tan, well, he already said that they've been token maxing over at Y Combinator much longer than most people have. But here's the other side of that story. 3 independent analytics firms looked at the data, and they all found basically the same thing here. Waydev, that's the firm behind today's number of the day, tracked 10,000 engineers and found that while 80 to 90% of AI generated code gets accepted on the surface, only 10 to 30% actually survives once you account for rewrites that happen weeks later. Get Clear found that regular AI users had 9.4 times higher code churn than non AI users. And Pharos AI, in a March report based on 2 years worth of data from over 22,000 developers, found that code churn increased 861% under high AI adoption. I think personally, Jellyfish put the finer point on this. They studied 7,548 engineers and found that the developers with the largest token budgets produced twice the output, yes, but at 10 times the cost. Linear COO Christina Cordova put it this way, and I really, really like this quote. This is probably one of my favorite quotes I've read recently. Ranking engineers by token spend is like me ranking my marketing team by who spends the most money. Don't mistake a high burn rate for a high success rate. Well, so what? Well, if your company is measuring AI adoption by how much you use or how much other people use, whether it's by tokens consumed or prompts sent, that's measuring the input, not necessarily the output here. Question isn't how much AI you're using, it's whether the work that comes out the other end is actually better. All right, go take a quick pause here. If you have found this episode useful, if it's helping you put a name on something you've been feeling about with AI at work, or if the token maxing data gave you something to talk about at work today, I'm going to ask you to share this episode with at least one person. One person, whether it's a text message, email, LinkedIn, DM, whatever it may be. I would really appreciate it if you shared this episode with them. Text them the link, takes all of 5 seconds. You share with them, it helps the show grow, and I would greatly appreciate it. All right. So, after an episode talking about companies losing leaders and productivity metrics that don't add up, I want to take a moment to talk about something maybe a little bit more personal because there's a question that a lot of people that may be listening to this show have probably asked an AI chatbot at some point in time. Maybe it's more personal. Maybe they're looking for some help, some guidance, whatever it may be. Maybe it's a relationship thing. I don't know. Maybe you just need to talk through something and you didn't want to call a friend at 11 p.m. Well, surveys show that a significant number of people, especially in the younger age range, have used ChatGPT, Claude, or apps like Character AI and Replica as kind of an emotional sounding board. It's not necessarily therapy, but it is something. On April 13th, Maine Governor Janet Mills signed LD 2082 into law. It makes Maine the second state, just after Illinois, to prohibit AI from providing clinical mental health therapy or psychotherapy unless it's delivered by a licensed professional. Violations carry fines of upwards of $10,000 per incident. The law was chaptered in as Public Act 687. Maine also passed a separate bill, LD 2162, restricting minors' access to AI chatbots with what the law calls quote unquote human like features. And Missouri is up next. HB 2372, an omnibus healthcare bill, is advancing through the legislature with similar provisions covering therapy, psychotherapy, and mental health diagnoses with attorney general enforcement. If Missouri passes, that's 3 states with AI therapy bans within just a few months. And there's a parallel bill in committee in New Jersey right now as well. So, why is this worth your time to keep an eye on this? Well, here's why this matters, even if you don't live in Maine, Missouri, New Jersey, or Illinois. The pattern here is the same one we saw with deepfake laws in 2024. A handful of states move, Then it cascades across all the other states. These laws aren't banning AI chatbots per se, they're banning AI from marketing itself as therapy or from providing what looks like clinical care without a human professional in the loop. That's a distinction a lot of people may not be thinking about when they open ChatGPT for something other than work related purposes. And if you work in HR or manage employee wellness programs, this directly affects your options here. Some companies have started offering AI mental health tools as part of their benefit stack. Two states have now said, well, that's not therapy and you can't call it that. The takeaway here, well, if you've ever vented to a chatbot about a bad day or a bad week, you're obviously not alone. And you're not doing anything necessarily wrong here. But the legal framework around what AI is allowed to say to you when you're struggling is now actively being written state by state. The tool isn't going away per se, but the rules around it are definitely tightening. All right. After a Monday episode like that with leadership crises at OpenAI, productivity illusions, and states banning AI therapy, I want to leave you with a scoreboard update that's actually kind of fun. DeepSeek, the Chinese AI lab that crashed NVIDIA stock in January of 2025 when it showed you could build frontier AI models for the fraction of the cost, is raising outside money for the very first time. At least $300 million dollars reported, putting DeepSeek's valuation at just over $10 billion. dollars. Until now, DeepSeek was funded entirely by its parent hedge fund, High Flyer Capital. The founder, Lian Wangfeng, had turned down every offer from Chinese VCs and tech giants. They wanted full independence, funded by a giant quant fund building world class AI. So, why raise the money now? Timing is suspicious, right? Well, rising costs and a thinning talent bench are really the name of the game here. Several key researchers have already left, one for Xiaomi, another for ByteDance. And the next model for DeepSeek, V4, is expected to cost upwards of $500 million dollars to train. For context, DeepSeek's $10 billion valuation is a fraction of OpenAI's $852 billion or even Anthropic's $380 billion valuations. But this is the same company that proved the AI race isn't just an American story. More competition usually means lower prices and better tools for everyone here. The scrappy underdog DeepSeek is actually growing up and the market is getting more crowded, which is probably a good thing in the long run. All right, a couple teasers here and a few things that we're actually watching. Adobe Summit kicked off last night in Las Vegas. Firefly AI assistant demos are expected there. If there's pricing news or a launch date, that could reshape how your design team works by summertime. OpenAI's next model, codenamed Spud, we're still expecting that as well. If there's anything on that front or if it is actually launched, that'll obviously take tomorrow's lead. And the Musk versus OpenAI trial is now just 7 days away from jury selection. If anything substantive drops in that case, it obviously becomes tomorrow's rundown. Hope to see you tomorrow. And that's Morning Intelligence for Monday, April 20th, 2026. If you liked what you heard, hit subscribe from wherever you're listening. Share with that one friend who keeps asking you, hey, what's going on in the world of AI? You know who they are. I'm Don Michalik. Thank you so much for listening and have a great start to your week.